Welcome back to the Working on the Dad pod. I'm Alex. With me, as always, is Ethan. And today we are working on part 2 of our series on taking advice. Today we are talking about taking advice from our peers. So this is going to involve taking advice from our friends who are parents like that are our same age. Maybe we see them out in public. Maybe they are parents of our classmates who maybe we don't categorize as our friends, but like we know them. But also our peers that don't have kids, right? Because we're in our early to mid 30s, and so there's that subsection of our friends that maybe haven't gotten married or just got married and don't have kids. And so I think there's a lot of different ways we can go here with getting advice from peers, because I think there's a lot of sources that we actually get that advice from. But let's start off with wins and losses. Ethan, I know last time we recorded, you didn't have a win, but you told me you thought of one.
I did. I did. Still here. And so my win actually is about my little baby. She is definitely in a daddy phase, and tonight, well, it actually happened twice today. I had to, when I dropped the girls off at school, I needed I normally walk in holding baby, got both their bags on the other arm. The toddler is walking in front of me, but one of the administrators needed me to grab something from the bag. So I was like, hey, can you hold the baby to the other one? And she was like, yes, of course. And she just immediately starts crying, which I had never seen before. Since she first started at school. Normally she's super cool with the teachers there, and hands the baby back to me, and she's instantly happy. And then I dropped her off first, and we had to then I had to take the toddler up to the next floor, and she cried as I left, and I felt really badly, and I was like, I wonder if that one change really messed things up. But then tonight, it was simply just we got to the point in bedtime when we split, and the girls and my wife takes the baby to nurse, and then I finish bedtime with the toddler, and as my wife's walking out with the baby, she just starts crying, and we were like, what's wrong? And she reached to me and just needed to give me one more big long hug before bed.
That's so sweet.
That lasted 45 seconds, and because I was like, no, we're gonna keep this going. And then
you can sleep in bed.
yeah. And then and then I handed her back to my wife, and she got sad again. But yeah, so she was just in a daddy mood, and I needed that after last episode's big L. Definitely needed this W.
So, yeah. Mine is actually strikingly similar. And I wasn't just piggybacking on yours, but my son has very much gotten into a dad phase.
Nice.
And it's relative, right? He's still it's very much been he's really excited to see me. He's always been a happy kid, always been excited to see me, but lately more so. And I think it's because he is getting to that point where he can string together thoughts. He can't string together words very well, but he can string together thoughts. So it's just dada, yes. And then he can tell me the thing and sort of have that back and forth, one word, okay, you want this? Yeah. Okay. Can you sit at the table? Yeah. Chair. That kind of thing. And so that's helped his communication. But the other night he had a moment where he had fallen down, and we were all there. It's just he tripped, and from standing still or moving around the floor, he fell, however long it was, to just the floor. Nothing crazy.
Mhm.
Just a little tumble. But we're all there. My wife's there. My daughter's there. This is in the dining room in the evening. And my wife goes to pick him up, and she's like, "Oh, baby, what's happening?" And he just shakes his head at her and goes, "No, no, Dada." And then he reaches
Aw.
to me, and I feel better. And I was like, you know,
Victory. Johnny Drama style.
like the old Donald Trump meme. I was just like, "Stop the count," you know, like
Right.
this is it. Just take one for the team. What I did leave out of the story until this point on purpose is my wife was the one who knocked him down, and that
Nice.
may have played
Nice.
a role in why he wanted dad, because he
Sure.
knew
Sure.
his assailant. But yeah,
Yeah.
what about your loss? I know you had a pretty big one last time. I don't know if you got anything else in the bank
Um,
that you could
just
run your hand lose.
yeah, no, I would just say overall life stress with this upcoming
Sure.
wedding this weekend. It's
Mm.
the communication around it has been not great. It's my wife's family, but um, it's, if we're being totally honest, just the logistics of this wedding, I think, are
Sure.
so annoying that I would find it very surprising if either of us had fun. Especially
Yeah.
like when you factor in the whole leaving the kids here in DC with two separate babysitters because we can't find one for both nights.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What about you? You have an L?
Yeah. So my L is fairly small, but it's been like a nuisance. Also, with my son, he's gotten to this age, and I sort of mentioned this when I was talking about Disney World, of like he wants to go everywhere and do everything, but he can't like do anything. But he has gotten in this habit where he very much wants to walk in parking lots, right?
Mm,
Like going from the store to the car, going from the gym out to the car, those kinds of things. He very much wants to walk out there, but he goes through modes where it's just like he doesn't understand. Like, you can't have the conversation with him yet about like why you need to hold a hand and why it's important and how the cars could smush you and that kind of thing. And so he just wants to pull away because he's like, "I'm good. I know how to walk. I don't need your hand." And then he gets frustrated, and then he gets doubly frustrated when I pick him up because I'm like, "It's hold hand or carry, bud. It's hold hand or carry." And he
yep.
doesn't. I'm like, "Okay, now I got to carry you." But now he's big enough and mobile enough that he's like pushing me and punching me in the face. And I've got a gym bag that I'm also trying to carry, and a 4-year old, almost 5-year old, who I'm sitting there, and I have to trust her to stay beside me, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is a whole other level of trust because I'm like, I don't even have the free hands. Like, she
Right.
can hang on to the bag, but I'm like, she actually does great with this, but like, you got to stay beside me, and you got to stay beside me like a dog who's been
Yeah.
trained to heel, for lack of a
Right.
better term. That it's just like, you got to stay with me because like I don't have the hands to manage you, and he's an agent of chaos right now. So that's kind of been my loss. So like, I'm really excited to grow out of that phase to get to the point where he is actually okay, just like holding hands for a long period of time, and like doesn't just pull harder like the Chinese
Mm.
finger trap thing where he's pulling and so I'm
Sure.
gripping harder, and then he's sad because I'm gripping hard. And I'm like, I can't let you go, but I can't like let go of you and get enough reach in here to pick you up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's been a
No,
whole.
I deal with that too. And it's super frustrating because as well my baby's got a headbutt like Zinedine Zidane in that World Cup from a
There
bunch
you
of
go.
years ago. Yeah,
Throwback.
she puts a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I got you.
Well, but my thing with my son is like, I don't know that this is necessarily a new behavior, but like, it's gotten worse. But the real factor is
Mm,
less just like he wants to get down and walk and like wants to pull away from my hand. He is now getting fast enough where his run necessitate I do something more than a walk.
yeah.
Right? Like, he's gotten that fast where it's just like
Mhm.
if he's running and I'm walking, he's gaining ground.
Yeah, no, I got
And
you.
so that is also part of it, that I'm like, if I let you go and you take off, like I've got to be in the ready position if you're
That's
going
an
to
annoying
walk.
speed. Yeah.
Right, right. You know,
Yeah.
obviously with both my kids, I still got it. I can overtake them,
Sure,
but
sure.
but
You're
it
young
is, yeah, it
in
is
an
a
old way.
nuisance of a speed because it's a quick getaway. But anyway,
It's that clip in Family Guy. That was a minor inconvenience. Yeah, stopped you though. Yeah, made you think about it. So I got you.
so tonight we are once again talking about taking advice, but tonight we are talking about taking advice from our peers. As I mentioned already, that can be our friends with or without kids, coworkers with or without kids,
Hmm.
people who are also parents at the school. Um, and so this is an interesting one because I think this is something that has come up quite a few times for both of us, of just like it can be as simple as, you know, disagreements on how to
Hmm.
handle things and all that kind of stuff. For me, this one is a very tricky one because I think, unlike the parents thing where I mentioned, I feel like we're still trying to like make sure we have their approval on some level. Like I think there's a peer aspect to that too, right? Of like wanting to seem competent and smart and successful, you know, just like we did, you know, when we're fresh out of college, people talk about their jobs and what they're doing, you know.
Hmm.
And I know, especially where you live in DC, anybody who's affiliated in any way, shape, or form with the federal government loves talking in acronyms and, you know, all these things, and like sort of what sector of what department of what project of whatever they're working on, kind of thing, and throw as many words in there to, oh, okay, yeah, get that kind of head nod reaction. And that's
Sure.
not unique to DC. It's just it's a very specific thing in DC
Yeah,
that I notice very much.
but
Those, I think that translates to parenting.
yeah, and I will say that, and I want to get one thing out of the way, um, because I think it happened a lot, at least to me. And I know you like were at least part of some of those conversations because some of them happened over in like big group texts and stuff. But um, a lot of the peer to peer, unsolicited, sometimes solicited advice, a lot of it was around the pandemic when it first happened
Mm-hmm.
on
Sure.
just comfort levels, risk tolerances, um, you know, questioning sometimes to each other's face, like, why are you doing that when this is happening? Or why are you being so cautious? And, you know, without, I don't want to like waste too much episode time talking about that, but I do want to say, I just did
Right.
want to like say that there was, that's like, that could be its own category on just like,
It
uh,
could be, and I
yeah.
think it could be its own category. But if I'm being honest on
Hmm.
how I view that, yes, that's a very specific point in history that is not
Yeah,
going to be, you know, that it's going to be in the history books, right?
sure.
On us as a society. But I think what that was a perfect storm, if you will, of I think some of the through lines that we experience on a day-to-day basis with our peers still, when we're not talking about COVID and masking and vaccinations and all these kinds of things, when we're not discussing those topics. I think it was both. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot else to talk about because everybody was working
Sure.
from home. Our lives were turned upside down. It was dominating news cycles. It was dominating thought processes. It was dominating everything, right? It was the period of time, you know, you get to certain points in that time. It's like you're wearing a mask every single time you step out the door. You're, you know, isolating all the time. You're wiping down your grocery bags before it was realized that that wasn't a transmission method. You know, you're washing your hands raw 20
Hmm.
times a day. And so, you know, all these things, and you combine that with like all these little decisions that you're having to make about all these little potential situations that you might run into out and about, and you discussing these in a group chat. And so everybody's thinking about this topic, everybody's acting on this topic, everybody's got a thought on how they've done it on this topic. But you're also, and I think it was sort of what I was just talking about earlier, you're also looking for approval, but like wanting to
Mm-hmm.
be right and like not wanting to be seen as the bad parent or the sloucher parent or the parent that is doing something wrong.
Right.
And I think that that can be a conversation about, feeding,
Mm-hmm.
like how you teach your kids how to eat. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a conversation about sleep training. It could be a conversation about potty training. But we were having a bunch of those conversations in rapid fire about the thing that was at the top of the entire world's mind. And so
Yeah.
I think it was a perfect storm of all those same things just happening over and over again with the added like tension of I'm trying to parent through all the craziness. Like everybody had a bad time in the whole world, but I've also got little people to take care of too, right? So everybody is just
Yeah.
wound as tight as can be.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way to phrase it. It was a perfect storm um, of a moment of you know, a point in time that I hope we never have to experience again as a society. We absolutely will scientifically, but um, yeah, I just yeah. So let's get into just like everyday life, uh, peer to peer,
Yeah.
wanted sometimes unwanted advice.
Yeah.
So do you want to kick us off with like as an unspecific specific example?
So an unspecific specific example for me,
Yeah.
we have several friends around here, and you and I have friends, and there are a lot of people I know that have kids of around my daughter's age and younger.
Hmm.
And I think there are a lot of times when like lifestyles, right? Like come together in the real world where you're like evaluating and judging people's decisions and feeling like they're judging yours, or like maybe they're giving you advice and it just feels like, you know, an absolutely not kind of thing of like, it was one of my hot takes, right? One of my hot takes in our hot take episode was about being overly strict with the diet.
Hmm.
This is when I see, we've gone over to other people's houses or we've had people over and just like comments about sugar intake, right? Or like we don't let, and little Timmy is not a real character. I'm coming up with little Timmy. We don't let little Timmy, you know, eat that because so and so said so and so. And these kind of things that are usually that like are half meant as like legitimate advice, but also half meant as like I'm better than you. And those are the ones that absolutely grind my gears the most, where
Yeah.
there's like an elitism about what you're doing. The problem is I'm like, I am so sure that I've been guilty of it. Right? It's like I
I
cannot
mean,
sit there and say I've never said something like that with any degree of certainty, but there are different ways about like going about saying it, I think.
yeah. I've known you since 2007. So you are definitely not guilt free of that,
Sure.
parenting or not. But I will say, we all, the fact that you're aware of other people that do it does improve your own behavior
Right.
in going forward. Um, so that's, yeah. So ours is like similar. I mean, um, there you talk to the other parents like around preschool. I alluded to in an earlier episode about how in the moms group chat, some one of the moms was unhappy with um you know how the school's use of rainbows, and
Mm-hmm.
um basically projecting, even though it probably wasn't her intent, but when read in a group chat, basically was projecting her intolerance to the group, and she like legit got like eaten alive. I saw some of the the messages for it, and it's um, Yeah, so it's one thing that like you definitely have to be careful of. I know in my own, just like not off a group chat, but like in a personal experience, just with like some of the parents where just talking about like what TV, like screen time's a big one where you talk about the day and like how you're getting through it and like what you're doing, and then you hear like what they're watching, and then like you mention what you're watching, and then it's like, oh, like we don't watch that anymore. And you ask why, and then it's like some like reason you didn't even think of, and then you're wondering, oh, like should I have caught that, should I have missed that? And I know that was all like very very roundabout, but you don't realize sometimes in like just the everyday conversations that you're having with people where like where they're not just like on the offensive with judgment, but like they're inherently on the defensive. And I've got some friends who are parents who are definitely always out there to overcorrect a potential judgment. Sometimes
Right.
it's via social media, sometimes it's just like in person, and we're all just trying here. We don't all view the same things as the same level of appropriate or inappropriate for our kids. So it's just kind of like
Yeah.
we all make our own decisions, and I think
Yeah.
there needs to be a universal conference of the parents to be like, there's black and white on the good and bad stuff. Like, don't hit your kids, and like make sure that they eat. That's bad and that's good,
Right.
respectively. And then it's like, if you're a Bluey family versus a Daniel Tiger family versus like, oh, I'll just let them watch YouTube, like teach their own. So,
Yeah, and I think this group, like psychologically for me, it commands a different type of respect than we were talking about, like with parents,
mhm,
with grandparents, to be more specific. I think it commands a different type of respect because I'm like, they are parenting through the same times, right? Like you talk about this disconnect between our parents parenting and us parenting and like the times that we live in.
mhm,
But that's not the case. Like, say I'm talking to you or any of our other friends with kids. It's like we were all parenting through the pandemic, or we are all parenting in the year 2023 with whatever unique challenges that brings. Um, and gentle parenting is now a thing, and you should do this, and you shouldn't do this, and this is this new medical thing or whatever. And so it brings me to a baseline of respect for them because I'm like, okay, we have a shared with my parents. It was a shared experience of my childhood, them on the parenting end, me on the child end.
mhm,
With this, it's like, okay, there's also a shared experience here of parenting in the year 2023 with all the things you can and can't do. Like we can sit here and commiserate and have like non-hostile advice giving, you know, conversations about which nut butter alternative we use because every
mhm,
preschool in 2023 is nut free because of potential allergies, which was not a thing nearly as much when we were kids, right? And so
mhm.
it's like, okay, we all understand that, like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of specific crap we got to pack for our kids and lunch, and like school supply lists are absolutely out of control, and the apps you got to use to keep in touch with teachers. We can have those things, those levels of conversation that we can commiserate about, which also makes it sting sometimes when you're like, okay, I feel like I'm doing everything right. And then these people are coming in and they're saying, we do this. And so while you're defending yourself, you're probably also like questioning yourself a little bit of like, well, shit, like, pardon the language, but like, oh, shoot, like, I thought I was doing it right, and I always viewed these people as informed, but that sounds kind of backwards to me. And like,
Yep.
I didn't check this, or I haven't thought a lot about this, or maybe, in all honesty, my wife did a lot more research on this particular topic than I did, and so I just went with her decision. And like, what if all these things are swimming through your head when you get
Mhm.
peer criticism that you don't get with parents,
Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
own parents as much.
Yeah, and it's in a very unhealthy way. There's like a competitive aspect to it
Right,
because we
sure.
we all want our kids to be like the best, but we don't want like, and we all want to be like the best parents we can be. Like
Yeah,
um we want like our friends to be talking about how we got it together, like so much more so. And
hmm,
it's we're all just in the same boat. We're all doing things differently. Some people
yeah,
are genuinely more chill, just like naturally, and some people are more stressed. And then there's couples where someone's the chill one, someone's the stressed one, and then those dynamics impact how one parents and how
yeah.
one takes criticism or how one approaches questions to their peers when they are in fact seeking it. So all that to say,
But
um,
I will also say this
yeah.
though on the flip side of this conversation, because I feel like I've drilled down on like what to do or like what happens when you disagree, mentally and emotionally. I would say to put a bow on that, I actually have a similar tactic to that as I do to excuse me, to our parents giving us advice. Is like I decide, okay, is this going to impact how my kid interacts with your kid? Is this going to impact my
Mhm.
kid? Okay, then maybe I just smile and nod and say thank you if the answer to that first question is no, if it's not going to impact my kid. But on the flip side of it, I will say, like, while parents have the benefit, grandparents, our parents have the benefit of relating back to our childhood and maybe things that we forgot, our peers can oftentimes just be like, we can be having conversations and not be like unsolicited advice, but like commiserating about the troubles we're having with getting kids to finish their dinner or get a
Mhm.
good night's sleep or whatever. And sure, you get some of that, like, oh, so and so is sleeping through the night 6 weeks old.
Right.
Oh, so and
Oh
so does
yeah.
that. You absolutely get that competition aspect, but then you can also, on the flip side of that, potentially get really good advice coming from
Sure.
like a different channel that you haven't seen because maybe they're like, oh, I saw this thing on Instagram, right?
Mhm.
Excuse me. And the thing I shared a while back, like I know this has helped out some parents in the class. We were talking about kids struggling to eat, and I brought up the alternative, like, okay, if you don't want what I serve for dinner, you can get peanut butter on toast with
Mhm.
carrot sticks. And I actually, you know, talked about the like, hey, this is one thing we did. I don't know if you guys want to try this, but like this seems to work pretty well for us. And then I've had people come back, at the next birthday party when we all get together and be like, yeah, that actually worked. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's not
Oh
to say
yeah.
that I have
I've
all the
definitely done. Yeah. I've definitely done that too, and I've asked like, yeah, I feel like the best environments are those mutual commiserating sessions where you're
sure.
both sets of parents are just like chatting and dealing with like similar issues, and you're at different stages of it, or they're flipped because you just dealt with one, now they're back at it. And that's like a great opportunity to just like talk about like how you got through it, and or how you didn't get through it, and you're basically taking notes on what not to do, which is also just as helpful. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so that can be really helpful because people can be in it and they can be starting from the same frame of reference of like, this is what this is sort of the upper and lower limits of what society deems acceptable parenting now, right?
right.
And those goalposts have shifted, but like getting different perspectives from the people who are living within those parameters can be super helpful.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, and then I think I am also similarly more likely. Obviously, I'm not giving my parents advice on parenting, but I am much more likely to also reciprocate with advice, or start with advice. If it feels like an appropriate situation, that somebody's struggling with something. But I do always try to frame it in that this is what we've done. It may work for you, it may not work for you. I've even shared pieces of advice that I think I probably shared on here of like, I don't think this would work for us. I remember the trick of like programming your smart home device to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, what's Bluey having for dinner or Daniel Tiger having for dinner
Right.
and having it repeat back to you. We don't do that, but I think it's genius for somebody who it would work for, right? And so I
Mm-hmm.
always try to frame things of like, this works for us, it may not work for you. And
Right.
creating that sort of like connection of like, I think too many people, you need to do this. I swear I did this. It worked. You absolutely have to do it. This is the only way. Like that kind of
Uh,
attitude, I see a ton. And that just like that, it does.
yeah.
You could be saying, I found the meaning to life. Your kid's going to sleep 10 to 12 hours every single night. They're never going to complain about a single other thing again. And they're always going to say please and thank you. But if you come at me and go, you need to do this, I'm done.
Right.
I'm out. I'm mental block.
I actually was just reminded of this last Saturday morning. It was my toddler's ballet class, and two of the moms in the class were talking about having issues with their younger ones sleeping, and one of the specific issues was just like they converted their guest room into the baby's room. But it's like a ginormous, like huge bed that they just haven't moved. So like they've got the crib, and then the kid's now getting out of the crib, but like the bed's there, and there's not like a lot of room for walking. And I like did insert myself into the conversation, and I was just kind of like, what is so I was like, sorry for like jumping in, but we just dealt with some like sleep stuff too. Are you saying that like your kid is crawling, like getting out of the crib? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, and then what do they do with that big bed? And it's like, well, like they prefer to sleep in that. And I was like, did you think about getting those like little rails that you can take on and off the bed, and like if you don't want to move that bed, but you can like get the crib out of there to give them more walking space so it's a little safer. Like, do you care if they sleep on the bed? And they're like, actually, no.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can get so far in the sink that you like lose yourself of like that thing of like you're like, God, I just need them to stay in the crib, and you're missing the like bright orange sign over there that says getting out of the crib regularly is a sign that the child may not be need to be in the crib anymore. And you're like, oh yeah, that thing.
And it's like you're gonna need the baby rails anyway, but like if the kid just wants to sleep on this like giant mattress and like it's in the room anyway and you don't want to move it, like save yourself buying a twin bed and just let the kid sleep on this thing.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And those rails work. We have that for my son. He's 20 months old. That's what I've always mentioned. They have bunk beds. He's got a rail there that prevents him from falling out, but he actually can get up and down off the bed. Has not had any problems rolling out. And another one, I don't know if I would use it for him, but maybe slightly older. When my daughter started doing naps at my mom's house, she didn't want to like get a whole rail or whatever. But one thing she did is she actually got pool noodles. And if you take the pool noodles and put those underneath the fitted sheet, like on the edges of the bed, that can, if they're rolling, that creates a like barrier. I think it works best if your fitted sheets are like really fitted, and if you have like old sheets that are not as like elastic as they used to be, that may not be the best thing. But it's a good stopgap. For no pun intended. But yeah, so that for me is what it boils down to anyway with peer advice, that it is the one that I'm like, I would say I have less of a visceral reaction to it than parental advice. I sometimes find it helpful, but it is definitely like more competitive, where like I would say my initial reaction to getting this type of advice is more like, well, no, I have the best kid, and it's because I did XYZ. And like my kid took his first steps earlier than your kid. It's because I'm a better parent.
Right. It's definitely like kind of things. Yeah, it's just so much more nuanced, and there's different layers to it because again, sometimes you're there. Sometimes like you're the one giving the advice and it's helpful or not helpful. Sometimes you're there taking it. Sometimes it's just like you got caught in a wrong conversation and it doesn't really apply to you, and you're just kind of like listening and unfortunately judging. Yeah. So I agree with you. It's the group of people where it can be the most beneficial, but it can also be the least useful.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, guys.
Or
Well,
most
I think
useless.
we'll leave it there because I think we've said everything that we needed to say on that. But yeah, thanks for tuning into Working on the Dad Pod, and catch us next time for part 3, which is total strangers and their advice.
And just
See
to
you
stay on this episode a little longer, you couldn't say this whole episode better than we could. Just kidding. Not that competitive.
guys. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.